You know, sometimes you're just sitting in the office bored waiting to go home, and then a bird face plants the window.
Hello there.
So that's how every enemy feels when you play GARA. And no, I'm not exaggerating. If you thought Nova was deadly, you haven't seen what GARA can do with the right build. He is absurdly powerful.
That's a lot of damage.
Having insane CC potential, insane damage potential, high damage reduction, infinite damage scaling, and most importantly, he's fun. Because the most important part of any game is to make sure that you're having fun. And I never played GARA, ever. I thought GARA was probably one of the worst warframes to exist, but now I'd argue that she's probably one of the best. You press one button and you just delete rooms. If you guys didn't know or have been living under a rock, there was a massive Exalted Rework where stat sticks now are no longer a hard requirement for any warframe. So if someone is telling you to buy a Riven because it's a stat stick, they've been changed to have their own mods applied to them now, meaning in Arcane perks, any mods from your melee weapons do not work or affect exalted weapons now. However, mod set bonuses still do work, so keep that in mind. They also have their own combo counters, meaning you can add mods like Blood Rush or Weeping Wounds to the exalted weapons themselves. Now I will say, and make this a hard requirement, if you are a player who's been playing for a long time, Naramon is a must. It stops you from losing your 12 times combo, keeping your DPS top notch throughout the entire mission. So if you're someone who has Naramon unlocked, just use it. Alright, not to waste any of you guys' time, let's get straight into what her abilities do. Shattered Lash is GARA's first ability. GARA swings or thrusts the glass blade depending on whether you tap or hold the ability. Tapping the ability key is a quick sweep if you have the settings inverted, which is great for wide hits, and this version of the ability has slash damage as its main damage source. The hold cast turns it into a precise jab, which deals puncture damage. Now puncture damage obviously is much worse than slash damage, so I would say here that just invert the ability key in your settings and just use slash. Another good thing about sweep is it covers a wide area, and not only that, the sweep is not perfectly aligned in a straight line. It's similar to a wave S pattern, allowing Shattered Lash to hit enemies that are slightly higher in terrain elevation. Now this is the ability that has been changed to have its own base stat. You don't need to rely on melee weapon mods anymore. You can just mod Shattered Lash however you want. An important thing to note is that casting speed is not affected by attack speed on the exalted weapon itself. So equipping mods like Fury will bring you no benefit. This ability has an augment called Shattered Storm. When the mass Vetrify ring is shattered with GARA's first ability, whichever enemy that is hit by the AoE is affected by Splinter Storm at 100% power strength. Even though this augment sounds good, it's kind of bad, because all the damage scaling that Splinter Storm can have does not get added to the Splinter Storm that is applied on the enemy, which makes no sense. I'm sure this is another one of those DE bugs, but regardless, this augment mod is mostly useless. Splinter Storm is GARA's second ability. This is your offensive as well as your defensive ability. It's her main survivability tool, which gives GARA up to a 90% damage reduction with some additional power strength added to the build. Now this ability doesn't only just protect you, it also scales with damage. The more you shatter Vetrified enemies, the stronger it becomes. And this isn't a temporary buff to your Splinter Storm damage. This damage can scale indefinitely. The damage Splinter Storm does also staggers enemies which are close, helping you keep any London citizens away. This ability can also be cast on allies, making GARA an amazing support frame for high level missions. The augment mod for this ability is called Mending Splinters. For each target affected by Splinter Storm, GARA heals 15 health per second. It's a great augment for health tanking builds, but since GARA has a very low armor pool, it's not something that I would recommend you build for, because most of the tanking that she will do will be from her shields. Spectral Rage is GARA's third ability. It distracts enemies while reflecting any projectiles they try to shoot at the glass to themselves. While this is not a top tier damage ability, it's good for holding choke points and pairs surprisingly well with crowd control based frames. The augment for this ability has a 50% chance to drop energy orbs. Now unfortunately this doesn't scale with power strength as far as I know. If you're having any energy issues on GARA, then this is an ability that you can use. But do bear in mind, this is the common ability removed for subsume slots, so I will say that this ability isn't great and there are much better subsume options you can apply to GARA. Mass Vetrify is GARA's signature ability. GARA becomes immune and builds a circular wall of glass that vetrifies any enemies caught within it, turning them into glass sculptures. These enemies become shatterable, which is perfect for boosting your Splinter Storm's damage and helping you scale it to do millions. The wall itself forms a barrier, but this isn't just a defense move. When you strike the wall with Shattered Lash, which is GARA's first ability, it explodes, sending high damage glass fragments outwards. While this damage isn't insanely high, even with millions of damage stacked up, any lower level enemies will still get nuked. Another important thing to note is this is the main way you build the damage up, so you don't have to wait for the full glass ring to form before breaking it. The quicker you cast the wall and the quicker you shatter it, the quicker you will build up the damage. Now, two important things that the game doesn't mention. When you cast Mass Vetrify, it refreshes the timer of Splinter Storm on GARA herself. Now this is important if you want to get your damage up to the millions, because you can't recast this ability on yourself. You can cast it on allies while you have it applied to you, but you can't cast it on yourself. So using Mass Vetrify every 20 to 30 seconds helps you keep all the damage that you've stacked up on your warframe, because if Splinter Storm's timer runs out, then you will lose all of the damage that you have stacked up. Another important thing, Splinter Storm can be cast on defense targets. Now the damage reduction that Splinter Storm gives these defense targets is capped at 50%, but remember, if any enemy tries to get too close, then they will get staggered as well as get damaged. So casting it on defense targets can sometimes, in some cases, make these defense targets near enough invincible to all damage. Now before we get into the build, I want to talk about two arcanes for Shattered Lash. The first is Melee Influence and the second is Melee Afflictions. Now Melee Afflictions is an arcane that doesn't get used much, but what Melee Afflictions does is any enemies affected by status effects gain an additional 6 stacks when they are knocked down or flung by melee attacks. Whenever Shattered Lash is casted, the sweep one, enemies will fall to the ground, and this counts as a knockdown. So if you have something like Toxin, which bypass shields, you can one-shot every Corpus unit in the entire game and do millions of damage to enemies with even high armor. The second is Melee Influence, which we all know how this works because everybody uses it on every single build they've ever made. And I will say Melee Influence is probably the better arcane to use just because of its AoE damaging potential, but Melee Afflictions is still a very good arcane you can use on Shattered Lash, so you can decide what you want. You can either have more sustained damage with Melee Influence, or you could have much higher DLT damage from stasises from Melee Afflictions. For my build, you have the option to use 3 subsume abilities. The first one is Raw, which increases the status damage, especially paired with the arcane Melee Afflictions. If you would like to have red crits, you could use Wrathful Advance. And if you want to have a sustained energy economy as well as viral application without modding it onto Shattered Lash, you can use Nourish. Now, I would advise most people stay away from Wrathful Advance because I don't like this subsume ability personally. It feels very janky, it has a horribly long cast animation, and on top of all of that, it has a low duration. And does GARA even need red crits? No, because she already does an absurd amount of damage with the status effects that she applies. Since GARA has now become more of a caster frame rather than a frame that uses weapons, I would argue that Nourish is probably the best ability you can use on GARA, paired with Melee Influence as the arcane you use on Shattered Lash. So for the Nourish build, I have Steel Charge as my Aura slot and Prime Sure-Footed as my Exilus slot. Transient Fortitude, Blind Rage and Umbral Intensify are my 3 ability strength mods, and the reason why I have 3 is because we have Overextended. Now Overextended takes away a lot of ability strength, and GARA is a warframe that scales very harshly with ability strength because her Splinter Storm damage multiplier is affected by ability strength. The base damage of Shattered Lash is again affected by ability strength. Mass Vetrify's explosion damage is again multiplied by ability strength, so you want to have as much ability strength as you want. For survivability, we use Splinter Storm, Adaptation, and Arcane Aegis to help GARA's shield tank. Now 290% damage reductions is very high, and you most likely won't need a third. A good thing about shields is shields come with an inherent 50% damage reduction from all sources except toxin. From that innate 50% damage reduction, we have 3 layers that enemies have to get past, and with Arcane Aegis, anytime our shields get damaged, they will replenish, which helps GARA survive pretty much everything. Prime Flow is used for maximum energy. Prime Continuity is used for additional ability duration. For our last mod slot, I use Equilibrium. The only reason is because our efficiency is 45%. GARA's abilities do require a lot of energy to be cast consistently, so having Equilibrium on GARA is quite important. For our 2 arcanes, we'll use Molt Augmented and Arcane Aegis, which I don't have because I sold it. I just need to buy it again. I'm not gonna lie to you guys, I completely forgot to show you the Shattered Lash builds. I am very sorry. It would have been funny if I released a video and then realized, oh wait, I didn't add the Shattered Lash build. For Shattered Lash, you have 2 builds, as I said before, Melee Afflictions and Melee Influence. This is the Melee Afflictions build. The reason we only have Toxin is because we only want Toxin. Toxin bypasses shields, therefore this build works for pretty much every single faction in the game, because when an enemy gets ragdolled, they have 7 toxin procs on them, and at 12 times combo, these toxin procs do 8, sometimes 10 million damage per tick. For our melee influence build, we use the exact same build we use on afflictions, but we just switch out the crit damage mod for a heat mod, and we switch the toxin mod in the bottom right to an electric mod, so we can have melee influence proc. For Archon Shards, I use a weird combination. I use 2 Violet Tau Forged melee critical damage shards. I use 1 ability duration shard, and I have a toxin shard. The only reason I have this toxin shard is because I do find myself using the melee afflictions toxin build quite a lot when it comes to corpus enemies, but when I'm doing long runs where I know there's not a lot of corpus enemies, then I will opt for my gas in an electric build with melee influence. If you guys reached the end of the video, big shout out to you. Thank you so much for supporting my channel. If you have subscribed, it means the world to me. Even if you've just left a like or a comment, thank you so much. You guys have given me a chance to become a YouTuber. I've been playing this game for 8 years, and I never thought once that anybody would watch my videos. So I'm glad people are liking them. That being said, please stay safe, guys. There's a lot happening in the world right now. Hopefully nothing escalates and nothing bad happens, but just focus on your families, focus on yourself. Please, please, please stay safe, and I hope you guys have a blessed week. Take care.